Hola, cage fighting connoisseurs. This is Kid Nate of BloodyElbow.com, joined once again by the ineffable, the inestimable Zane Simon, who's actually got something in the background this time. It's a special request. Thank you, Zane. We are here to talk about UFC 175, which has just ended. Some would say a shitty card, some would say an amazing card. The headlining fight, one of the best fights I can recall as an MMA fan. Chris Weidman defends his title against Lyoto Machida. But first, a disclaimer. This is not the sixth round of the fight. If you think this is the sixth round of the fight, I'm sorry, you're really stupid. And yes, I did just take your click because you're looking for something for nothing. So I feel no qualms. If you do want to watch the show, please give us a like right now because all said angry people who are looking to get the fight are going to be giving us a thumbs down. So if you watch this show normally, please give us a like because you know what we're going to do. And what we're going to do is two fans are going to watch about UFC 175. We both do this for money, so we're semi-professional, I guess. I'm a complete professional, but I'm still a fan. Most of my job is actually managing other people. So I'm not a professional analyst. Zane's not a professional analyst. We're not professional journalists. We're fans telling you what we thought about the fights. Now, Zane, Chris Weidman, Lyoto Machida, best fight of the year, hands down. How great was it in terms of all-time MMA fights?
Maybe not best fight of the year hands down, but easily top two right alongside that Hendricks Lawler fight.
Fair
Um,
enough, fair enough. That was a fight of comparable stakes. Johnny Hendricks, who took over the belt after George St. Pierre left the title, so fighting for big stakes and a great fight. Maybe it's because I'm more of a fan of Lyoto Machida than Robbie Lawler. I was a little more charmed by this one. And also, I think Weidman was hitting on all cylinders much more than Hendricks was. We found out after that fight, Hendricks was fighting with a cut bicep, I believe, a broken wing, and so not quite at his full performance. What other
yeah,
fight? Any other fight you think is close to this one this year?
this year, nothing's coming to mind at
All right,
all.
and so in terms of all-time
All
MMA
time,
championships,
I would say that between it feels like in the past, like not calendar year, but the past 365 days. Well, actually, when was Jones Gustafson?
that
That
was a
was
while back. I want to say that was UFC 164, so that was in the fall of 2013.
Yeah, so in the past 365 days, it feels like we've gotten three of the best title fights in UFC history.
Yes, that is an entirely fair statement because the Gustafson Jones fight was a great fight where we saw Jones, a champion who'd never before really been pushed to his limit by a guy we did not expect to do it. And tonight, I think we saw what we expected. It
Yeah,
didn't have that oh shit factor. It had that this is what we expected. I picked Lyoto Machida in my show with Eugene Care Don't Care preview, Eugene S. Robinson, because I wanted us to disagree about our picks. And I said that at the time because I love Machida and he had a real chance and he showed it. There were several
yeah.
times when he could have won this fight tonight. And that's what you love. You had skill, you had strategy, you had heart, you had momentum swings, everything you could ask for a fight. And Chris Weidman, what a great performance. This guy can execute a game plan. This guy can turn things around when he's in a tight spot. This guy can ride out a storm. And Machida has shown that he can now go for the kill. He can ride out a storm. He can take a beating. He can come back. He can solve a very difficult puzzle like Chris Weidman to a certain extent. If he had more knockout power, he could have won that fight maybe on two or three different occasions, but he just didn't have the firepower.
Well, and Weidman's got a young man's chin. I mean, not only does he have a great chin, but he's got like an untested chin.
It's
This is
more tested after
Well, it's
tonight
more
than it was
tested
before.
tonight. I mean, and it's outstanding. But I mean, it's somebody, he's never been cracked, he's never been stunned, he's never been hurt. This was the first time that he got hit nearly enough to make any of that happen. And, he's still got an amazing chin. And I don't know that anybody else in the division could ever find him and hit him with that kind of regularity. I mean,
No, Machida's
Vitor
definitely
might
the
have enough.
ultimate sniper in that division.
Yeah, I mean, Vitor might have enough power, but I don't think he'd get nearly the same opportunities that Machida did.
And how did you score the 5 rounds?
Uh, I would have said 49-46 or 48-47. I would have been happy with 48-47, but
Which rounds
49,
would you give to Machida in each of those
it'd be
scenarios?
4 and 5 or only 4.
Okay, and the
I think
judges, one judge found it 49-45 every round, a complete blanketing for Chris Weidman. The second judge found it 48-47, meaning he gave one round to Machida. Third judge found it 49-46, meaning he gave two rounds to Machida, meaning that
well,
it's
the judge who found it 49-45 gave a round to Machida too. He just
ah,
gave
yes, yes, you're
he gave
correct. Obviously,
he gave
50-45
Weidman a
would be
10-8
this
in
is
one
Kid
of them.
Nate for those of you who haven't watched before. I can't do math. That is an amazingly stupid statement. 50-45 obviously we won. But how the hell do you get 49-45?
Gave him a 10-8.
A 10-8.
Yeah.
That,
In,
that um,
yeah.
math. It's a wondrous thing, kids. I cannot emphasize enough. Do not become a calculator dependent imbecile like myself. Um, boy,
But
that's embarrassing. But we'll keep moving along because it's heroic. But the other fight that mattered on this card was Ronda Rousey's amazing performance. I mean, it wasn't like, oh my God, she just painted the Mona Lisa here. She beat somebody she was supposed to beat, but she did it in an awesome fashion. The
yeah.
people that I had over here watching who are not regular fans were awestruck by that. And that was the only fight they paid attention to all night. So take
Yeah.
that what you will.
No,
Um,
Ronda Rousey, and that's the thing that I was talking about before this card, looking just at like the difference between how much traffic we tracked with our vivisection video for this card and for Tough 19. And it was like 5 times the traffic for UFC
yeah,
175. And I think it's hard to, I mean, it's not even like overstating or understating, but it's hard to understand exactly how Ronda Rousey draws because she doesn't draw the typical fan base. It
it's
seems like
not that hard to understand. She's an attractive woman who fights incredibly well and is a champion at cage fighting. That's an enormous novelty in this society. This is only the second person to ever achieve that feat, Gina Carano being the
yeah.
first. So that's how she draws.
Well, yeah, but I
Now,
mean, like but it like it seems like every time she fights, she draws different people. Like it's not like the same. It's not like there's this massive all these people coming out of the woodwork for every Ronda Rousey fight. It always feels like she's somehow catching a different batch of lightning in a bottle, kind of
it
thing.
is. I can see that. So it's a novelty fight, but and I agree with you. It does not seem to be building on its own momentum.
No.
She's catching, but is she building? And thank God, after the Rousey fight, the biggest story of the Rousey fight is Joe Rogan comes on the air,
Oh God.
asks her if she was willing to step up and fight at UFC 176, which just lost its headliner, featherweight champion Jose Aldo had to pull out of a fight against Chad Mendez. That card is in terminal danger. It could very
Yeah.
likely be canceled because 174 was just a flop. They've had bad luck with August cards before. They don't have that. They've spread their cards so thin. They don't have a card to play for that backup card for the headliner of that. And so, in some planet, Ronda Rousey could headline that card had she not apparently broken her hand tonight. Nonetheless, when she's talking about having knee surgery after the fight, that was a big rumor before this that she was going
Yeah.
in with a bum knee. So that makes everybody nervous because you're thinking, oh my God, she's fighting Alexis Davis. This fight means literally nothing. It's a warm-up fight for Ronda Davis. It's not Gina Carano. It's not Chris Cyborg. It's not Holly Holm. It's not a fight that would have taken the needle from, I don't know, 300,000 to 500,000 fight buys up into the 600,000 to a million, like a really big
Yeah.
Ronda Rousey Chris Cyborg fight that was promoted in the media and handled right could be. So if she's already fighting on a hurt knee and risking that, to ask her to fight again in less than a month is insanely stupid. And UFC
Yeah.
President Dana White, to his credit, went apeshit off camera at Rogan.
On
His
camera, even there's
yeah,
video of it out there. I
well,
mean,
yeah, but not on the official
yeah,
pay-per-view
not on the.
broadcast. And so, I mean, what's your take on all that? Like,
I mean, it was insanely stupid. The thing is it would have been a fine, great, totally typical talking point for the post-fight press conference. It could have been something they could have
yeah,
brought up then and
sure.
said, we're thinking about having her fight next month. We're going to talk to her camp and all that and see, or then
Or
had
a
Ronda
reporter could have
address it.
asked her that question,
Yeah,
and then
or
they
then
look
and
like
then
the
had
dumbass.
yeah, and then had Ronda address it or whatever, and that'd be fine. But right then in the moment when you're celebrating this big win, we finally just barely got a little momentum built in this card. Everybody's up, everybody's excited, everybody's happy, and then you come out right when somebody's in the like post-fight euphoria of I just knocked somebody out in 15 seconds, and you say, "How about making a major life decision that only benefits us right now?" And that's
Exactly. It,
it's
it's
so
it's
stupid and selfish.
yeah, it's the equivalent of like somebody on a date that probably shouldn't have had sex with the other person, that somehow the situation was manipulated, lays out a rail of coke, and then says, hey, how about we go in on a business deal? How about we get married? Something like that. Like, you're in an altered state after you just fought. She's had the, like, unless you've had a massive achievement like that in front of a huge audience, you have no idea what Ronda Rousey experienced. She went through all the adrenaline of a physical fight, the fear, the excitement, the bloodlust. She went through all the experiences of being a rock star and having a huge crowd with the lights on her and people screaming her name. So most people have never experienced either of those two things. She just went through both of them at once and might have been hurt. And Joe
Yeah.
Rogan's asking her this question and puts her in a position where she can either say, no, you dumbass, I'm not going to do that, which would make her look bad in front of the fans and make her look like not a team player with the promotion. Or, I mean, it doesn't play well. No, she handled it perfectly with the,
Yeah.
I'd love to do it, but I got to talk to my coaches. Well,
Yeah.
sure, that's a perfect response. She's a pro. She handled that deftly. But nonetheless, disastrously stupid. Now let's talk about what a piece of dog shit the rest of this card with. Tragically, Stefan Struve was unable to fight. Not tragically, maybe fortunately. Now, Dana White said he just had a panic attack and couldn't fight. This is a kid who's
Yeah.
been out for around a year with serious life-threatening heart problems. They thought he might never fight again. He was cleared by some doctors to fight. But again, there are doctors and there are doctors. It could entirely be possible he's not safe to fight. And so he was supposed to fight Matt Mitrione in a heavyweight fight. The most dangerous situation you can do in the MMA is get into the cage with a heavyweight. That's like, and Struve is a guy who's known for taking damage. So he's out. That's the number 3 fight on the card. That's the only other card on the pay-per-view that was of any significance or meaning to most fans.
Yeah,
Boom,
no,
it's
that
off.
sucked. I mean, I'm kind of glad to, the reports, or the secondary reports and the poor reports that sound maybe slightly more probable is that he had a panic attack.
Sure.
And I'm willing to believe that just because I think that's a totally natural reaction to have
It's
before
a
you're about to
totally,
step up in front of a huge room full of people and get locked in a cage to fight some dude.
yeah,
Like,
especially when you're coming in off of a year's worth of heart
yeah,
trouble. And
yeah,
panic
exactly.
attacks are very hard to tell from heart attacks. Anybody who's never
Yeah,
had one or the other, people who've had both come out and say, "Oh yeah, I've had heart attacks, I've had panic attacks." They're equally as scary. So that's what a panic attack is. It's not as dangerous, obviously, but if you've ever experienced one, it's terrible. However, Dana White's not a doctor.
no,
Dana
he's not
White's
a
a fight
doctor.
promoter, and God bless Dana White. Love Dana White. Dana White's the greatest MMA promoter ever. But you don't trust a promoter during the middle of a pay-per-view
No,
card to have the final
which
word.
also means that we don't know that he blacked out or passed out or
We don't have
fainted
any
or anything.
details.
We don't
We
know
know nothing.
anything other than the fight got canceled at that
Yeah,
point, which is why I'm saying I think that the panic attack of everything I've heard,
he
that's
was back out in the
probably
audience supposedly afterwards and not in the
yeah.
hospital.
Yeah,
So
I would believe that more than I would believe he blacked out or like passed out or
yeah.
something. Like at this point, all of these things are just secondhand news that we're getting through the chain, and
So,
who knows? I'm
despite the
sure.
fact that we're fans and not journalists, we're trying not to irresponsibly speculate because we try
Yeah.
to be good, pro-am, blogger, vlogger, journalist-ish, whatever the fuck we are. But still, scary moment for those of us who care about Stefan Struve. And I mean, as a
Yeah.
fan, somebody who's seen him fight, like I'd be sad for the guy if he were to,
Oh yeah.
And so, but nonetheless, as a fan who just shelled down 45 or 55 bucks. Instead of 5 fights, I get 4 fights, and instead of 3 fights I cared about, I get 2 fights I care about, and then I get Uriah Hall versus Thiago Santos, which was the highlight of that was Uriah Hall had a ghastly broken small toe,
Yeah.
and same old Uriah Hall who can't pull the trigger on a guy who should. I mean, he's juking in front of him, like still no big knockout from Uriah Hall, and Russell Doan then gets a split decision win over Marcus Brimage in a fight
Oh,
I thought early on he should have. Won handily. But what do you think of that decision? What do you think of that fight?
the Doan fight. So first of all, the Hall fight. I'll say this: I was impressed with Hall with a broken toe. The
Sure,
fact
that
that
was gritty and tough
with
and
his foot
ballsy.
with his foot broken, he came out and he put on a solid, if not incredible, performance. He does still look like a guy who is way, way, way worlds more talented than his opponent out there, and still puts on a close fight for no discernible reason.
This time there was a
Uh,
discernible reason though, and it was a
yeah, this
ghastly
time there
break.
was a discernible reason,
If
so it
that
was
happened
that
to
was
me or
gutsy.
you, we would be in the hospital right now. We would have been headed to the hospital the moment
Oh
that
yeah,
happened. We'd be crying for pain pills. We'd be telling stories about it. I mean, this was
yeah,
a ghastly, horrific injury, and it's incredibly ballsy. But again, this guy's a professional prize fighter, so that just comes with the territory. So,
yeah.
sorry
Um,
if we're harsh on the guy, but what fans wanted to see was Uriah Hall get the big knockout, and what we got instead was a gritty performance through a ghastly broken toe, not the satisfying outcome.
yeah,
Now,
and
Doan and
then
Brimage.
Doan Brimage, Doan, I guess, he didn't win this fight, at least by my estimation. It wasn't like a
You
terrible
had it
robbery.
for Brimage.
Yeah, 30-27 for Doan was a terrible card.
That was a bad, 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 bad score.
And
Yes,
I would
yes.
say that Brimage clearly won the first round, and then
Hmm.
the next two rounds were very close, but I thought that Brimage probably did more in the second. I'm thinking it was the second or the third that
We don't
he
need that.
had.
Nobody cares about the details of that fight. But I
Yeah.
would say
Anyway, it
that
was just.
if Doan the one thing you'd say in the judge's defense is if Doan had a great round, it was the first half of the first round. That was
Yeah.
his best part, and so you could see somebody. It would be. I would say it was a mistake, but I can see there's a logical reason as to why you would say he won the first round. So,
It
maybe it was
wasn't
three
the
twenty seven.
worst scorecard I've seen, but it wasn't
No, we're
great.
talking about mixed martial arts where we always have terrible
Yeah.
scorecards. So, I mean, overall, like as a pay-per-view goes, you had Ronda Rousey in a star turn doing what she's
Yep.
supposed to do, and that's fine, and that builds her up for her next fight. And hopefully, it looks like she's probably going to take some time off and make movies instead of having another fight. So,
Yeah,
you
which
know,
would be smart.
that's the only thing for her to do. She's hot right now. But look at what the UFC did. They played this card, the Ronda Rousey card, as if they had all the Ronda Rouseys in the world. Like if they're even thinking about booking her for the next pay per view, they're not in the Ronda Rousey business. They're in the
No.
UFC business. And if
Yeah.
they had pulled out all the stops to get either Gina Carano or Chris Cyborg, it could have been a huge pay per view. And if
Yeah.
they had even pulled out some of the stops and gotten Holly Holm, it could have been a pretty big pay-per-view. And sure, Holly Holm hasn't earned a shot in the division, but look, women's bantamweight's hardly been around long enough for you to say, "Oh, the UFC champion should never face somebody who's 7-0 and has never fought in the UFC." Dude, I remember when the UFC used to book people who hadn't fought in the UFC all the time in title fights, and this wasn't in the early barbaric days. This was like in the Matt Hughes days. Matt
Yeah.
Hughes fought Sean Shirk once upon a time in a headlining fight, and it was the toughest fight of his career up to that point. It was a great fight. And they can sell Holly Holm. It's not hard. Hey,
No.
we've got two super hot chicks. One's an Olympic judoka, and one of them's a champion boxer who's undefeated in cage fighting. They're gonna find out, and see what happens. That's called mixed martial arts right there. That's not UFC. That's MMA, and that's the appeal, and that's a proven product that you can sell. So, but they didn't do that. Instead, they have her fight Alexis Davis as if they have plenty of time to build Ronda Rousey, and they're going to be in the Ronda Rousey business forever. And Ronda could, I don't think it's likely, but it's entirely possible she could be in a hit movie. And at that point, it's bye bye UFC. Like the dynamic changes completely. And
Yeah.
so, anyway, bad booking. But okay, the rest of the card Uriah Faber and Bruce Leroy, aka Alex Caceres, headlined the Fox Sports 1 card. Everything I said it would be. Faber wins commandingly, but his style is such that, and Alex Caceres is his skill level and heart is such that he had a few moments to shine against Faber and comes out of this a much bigger star and much established himself, much like Forrest Griffin got over against, say, Tito Ortiz in one of his first outings in the UFC. He's got the seal of, wow, this is a real legit contender and top athlete, which is not something people would have expected be the fate of Bruce Leroy after that season of The Ultimate
No, it's
Fighter.
true. No, I mean Caceres he's established as a top 10 bantamweight now, or should be. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no
This is a
reason
division where
not.
Mike Easton was a top 10 bantamweight after what, three straight losses. So it's not like
Yeah.
that's winning the Nobel Prize, but still,
No,
it's
the division. I mean, I don't understand how. Well, I don't know. This is on journalists, honestly, or whoever you want to call whatever you want to call the people who do the rankings for the UFC. You know,
Yeah, journalist
uh,
is a stretch.
journalist is a loose term for anybody working in the MMA world, but he you know they don't. It's like that division. I mean, the division's not big on talent, but there was a serious lack of interest in figuring out what the actual talent in that division was.
Yeah.
And it's taken some time, but Caceres has finally put himself over to enough people that he should be considered in the top 10 now.
Yeah,
And
and
it's,
fighting Faber literally is the one guy in the division that everybody who follows the sport at any level knows who he
yeah,
is, knows
yeah,
him, and knows what he's about. And so it,
yeah,
it means a lot to be in there. And sure, he gets submitted in the third round, but he went to the third round with Uriah Faber. He rode out some storms.
yeah,
He had some moments and scored some points of his own. And I mean, it would have been, I think, a unanimous 30-27 decision had it
yeah.
gone the distance. But nonetheless, I mean, he had his moments and acquitted himself well. And in fact, the fact that it didn't go to the decision looks better in the long run for his record because people who didn't watch the fight will look back, well, he got submitted, but you never know what was happening there.
Yeah, I
As
mean, well, submissions are often like that's
Hail
always
Mary
when
passes.
I'm scouting fighters and I see them lose, like when I'm looking at like their Sherdog record, and I see them lose by submission. That's always like a question mark to me. It's like, well, maybe they were winning, maybe they were just trashing the guy and got an
Made a
armbar
mistake.
thrown on him.
Yeah.
You never know with the submission. It's
Yeah, it's the sneakiest aspect of MMA. The
yeah,
rest of the Fox Sports One card, you had a good knockout to open it from Bantamweight Rob Font over George
yep.
Roop. Not really a surprise. Font is the kind of short, compact killer that the 6'1" Roop consistently gets knocked out by.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great win for Font. It was a huge test for him and stepping into
Yeah,
the UFC against one of their longest running fighters and somebody who's not longest running like, oh, he's lost a bunch, but he's been around, but somebody who generally goes win-loss and competes well with the top of the division when he's asked to.
and destroyed the Korean Zombie Chan
Yeah,
Sung Jung, who fought gave Jose Aldo one of his tougher fights. I mean, like
yeah,
this is a guy who's had his moments of glory and has his share of heads on the wall and notches on his belt. And for Font to come out and just blank him like that, excellent. He passes the
yeah.
test. But again, that's a fight very few people care about. And then Bruno Santos versus Chris Camozzi was just
Uh,
a piece. I didn't even watch this fight. I rocked my baby daughter while my wife watched the fight, and I watched Twitter. And I'm confident I didn't miss anything because all I saw on Twitter was people complaining about how boring the fight was.
well,
You said before the fight what it was likely to be, which was Bruno Santos mugging the guy. And I'm not going to give you that credit. Somebody
no,
said that. It might not have been you, you sneaky bastard.
no.
What
What I said before the fight is that this is a very easy fight for Chris Camozzi to win
if he
because
doesn't throw a bunch of knees and keep getting
very
taken down and laid
predictable
on?
opponent with a very predictable style. And all Chris Camozzi has to do is what he's good at, which is sprawl and brawl. That's all he has to do is go out there, kickbox and sprawl. And he did that for a round, for the first round.
Yeah.
That's what he did.
And that's why he won that round on all three judges' cards.
Exactly. And
And
then
then,
after that, he started throwing jumping. Started throwing knees as takedown defense. And
yeah, which,
throwing Machida gets away with it because Machida is one of the very, very best fighters in this sport.
yes.
Nobody else should do. You shouldn't otherwise do it unless you're at 145 or below, where you're fast enough to quickly turn out and switch out. It's bad takedown defense as practice. And Camozzi got taken down every time. Had no answer for Santos's top control. It's
Oh, he did have
crushing.
an answer. Complain after the fight. That was Chris
Yes, he
Camozzi's
did have
answer,
an answer. That's right.
which
Complain
the
that the guy
fans
just trained to
hate
hug
that.
him.
Yes, the fans hate that. And so that was a disaster from Camozzi. Shitty fight. Bruno Santos, not somebody I'm interested in watching fight. Just a terrible lay and pray off artist. Then
Yep.
Kenny Robertson versus Ildemar Alcantara. Uh, Robertson got away with some flagrant nut shots in this one. He was
Yeah.
warned after multiple ones. Next time, I'm going to take a point. And the guy, you could see the guy thinking, "Why would I need to knee him in the nuts again? He's practically unconscious already." Like, I mean,
Yeah.
he just. It was a good, smart, gutsy performance from Robertson, though. Who was probably the physically inferior fighter. and had a limited skill set, but he played his cards very well and
Well,
totally
I mean,
dominated.
he clearly won 2 rounds based on
Oh, he
skill.
definitely won based
I
on
mean, but I
skill.
mean, I would say that it wasn't because of the nut shots.
No, no, but that was just part of the package.
Yeah.
You see, that was like
He,
GSP never won because of the nut shots, but I call him the championship round GSP nut shot for a reason. Like
well,
that's
yeah,
part of the mix, and so
it is.
Robertson
But
had
I
a
mean,
lot of quivers in his.
Robertson. I'm just happy to see Robertson do what he's good at, and that's wrestle.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's what he's good at doing. That's what he should do. And I was sad to see that what I expected. I expected Alcantara to win that fight, and what he showed in the last half of the last round was that he was fully capable of winning that fight. He just didn't click into gear at all before that. I mean, he
No,
got taken down, grounded and pounded,
he
over
hit a
and
lot of nut
over,
shots, and the
and
nut
nut
shots
shots.
take the wind out of your sails. That's the
Well,
thing
if
about.
that were true, he wouldn't have had such a good end of the fight. I
Well,
mean,
but if he had not had those nut shots, he might have been a roaring, unstoppable force that knocked the guy out. Like you
no,
take two nut
that's never
shots,
going
you
to be
got to have a
Alcantara.
fist fight.
Alcantara will never be a
Well,
roaring,
true.
unstoppable
It's
force.
true, it's true, but relatively, he might have had enough juice to finish the fight. Like you take two nut shots and then try to finish a
I
professional
no,
fighter.
I'm just saying that he looked
Let's
late
have a vote. If
to
anybody
the.
wants to see Zane take some nut shots, well, just kidding. Never mind. This isn't
Yeah,
a Howard Stern show.
let's not find out exactly how much you pay me to do.
Touche. Touche. All right. So that's a good note, kids. Send some money to Kid Nate if you want to see.
That's right. If you want to see me get hit in the balls, I need
Yes.
to get paid more. Send
Just
money.
watch this video. Watch every ad over and over and over again, dozens of times. That'll
That's right.
directly trickle down into Zane's pockets. So two more fights on the preliminary card. Kevin Casey destroys Boba the fight Nagy Bush, in 61 seconds. Uh,
Yep.
nothing you can complain about there. I mean,
No, I called that, and I called that for, and I did I thought Casey would get the submission, but either way, the reason I thought that Casey would win was exactly the reason that Bush lost, which is that his striking is bad, 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 bad.
Yep, and that's what happens when you try to fight professionally at the UFC. And this is marginally the UFC level they're on, but um, nonetheless, Casey's on his way. At middleweight, Luke Zachary did what we thought he would do in his first fight against Guilherme Vasconcelos. He won a unanimous decision. Impressive performance, showed he could outstrike the guy. A classic Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy with no wrestling game loses a striking match to a kickboxer. Anything to add to that?
Well, Zachrich is kind of a kickboxer. I mean, he's more of like a grappler who kickboxes as well. I mean, I think he actually is a
Yes.
grappling instructor at his gym.
Yeah,
But
yeah. So like, cause can you imagine Vasconcelos against a real kickboxer, like
no,
against a guy whose bread and butter was murdering people
I
with?
yeah. I mean, basically, all that fight told me was that I dramatically underestimated Kyle Magalesh because
That
I
guy.
thought that Magalesh pounded Zachrich out early because Zachrich was not athletically good enough to be at this level. And I expected Vasconcelos to be better athletically. He was a pretty good jiu-jitsu player. He was, he's
Refined
been
again
a.
and again. That is a deep fountain of skilled and trained athletes, but not necessarily
Well,
athletically gifted athletes.
I've watched him fight too, and I mean, he only has
Yeah,
3 pro fights, but the combined record of his opponents is like 60-30.
yeah. He's a tough
Like, I
dude
mean,
and very skilled athlete. I was just saying that
he's
jiu-jitsu is
been
not
fighting really good guys early in his MMA career, and I thought that he could maybe come out here and really turn it up on Zachrich, who looked like he just was too slow and didn't hit hard enough or do enough to compete at this
But
level.
instead, what you saw was Cal Magalhaes is actually a real badass, and now you're much more intrigued at seeing what he can do. And that's the whole
Exactly.
deal with fighting is it's a relative sport.
Yeah.
Like you can look, Ronda Rousey looked like God against Alexis Davis, but had she fought Chris Cyborg, very different outcome possibly. And so it's all very relative. And
Yeah, but
and
what that
that's
does tell me, what like Ronda Rousey's win over Alexis Davis tells me, is that those up and coming women in the division, most of them do not have any prayer at all.
no,
Because Alexis
no.
Davis was easily a top 5
So
bantamweight.
what happens now when and if Ronda Rousey moves on to Hollywood? The UFC doesn't have anybody else on the horizon with that kind of star-making charisma. The division is shallow as shit, and the girls are not that great. what do they do with that division then? Are they still going to be trying to headline pay-per-views with women's fights? Are they going to be
I
trying to?
mean, this
I
is
mean,
what I'm saying is that women's. Well, and the thing is, this is what I think is that like I think of women's bantamweight as men's light heavyweight.
yeah,
Basically, it's the star division, but it's also the shallowest division in women. I mean, okay, women's 145 is pretty obviously heavyweight, and there's just nobody there.
yeah.
But bantamweight is yeah, I mean it's the star division, but it's really shallow, and
It's also a
hopefully
division that's only ever had two stars and one foil in the whole
yeah.
history of the division. You've had Gina Carano, you've had Ronda Rousey. Those are two stars, and Chris Cyborg is popular
Well,
or can be in a
Toronto
big
never
fight.
fought at 135.
No, no, that's true. That's true. She fought at one. She did fight. She fought at 135 once. She fought at 140 a
She
number of times.
fought at like one, yeah, 138, I think
It
maybe.
was. It might have come in as a catch rate. I think she made 135 at one point, dude. I'm serious. I looked into
Maybe.
it a
Yeah,
while
she
back.
might have.
And but honestly, I should have mentioned that most of her fights were at 140 against 135 pounders. That was the
Yeah,
deal
you're
with
right.
Gina
She made
Carano.
135 in her very first fight. She
Yeah,
made
and
135.
frequently she would be weighing in against gals who had made the limit, and then Gina wouldn't, and they would come to some kind of term, so it was a catch weight, but it was still there was never any official titles or whatever. When she fought Cyborg, it was at 140 or 145. I can't remember which.
Yeah, it was at 145. But yeah,
Yeah,
Carano was 135, 138, 150, 141, 141, and 144. So, and
yeah.
then she finally settled. Well, then they actually formed the divisions and made 145, and she.
Yeah, I mean, I think to compare women's bantamweight against light heavyweight, men's light heavyweight, I get what you're saying. However, there's no comparison in terms of talent depth, history of the division as a
Well,
sport.
not history of the division, but talent depth at 145 right now. I mean, you're looking at John Jones, Gus. You're looking at like a top five, and then you've got Shogun and Henderson is still competitive, like top 10 ranked light heavyweights. I mean,
Yeah, old
you've
dudes,
got
and
some guys who are seriously on the slide, who are
but
who just have.
let's say light heavyweight lost John Jones tomorrow, God forbid, and women's bantamweight lost Ronda Rousey tomorrow, God forbid. Which division would be quicker to recover?
Well, yeah. I mean,
Men's
well,
light
they've got nobody
heavyweight, like
behind her at the moment.
8 out of 10 times. I mean, come on, like.
Well, for the very moment, but there's nobody coming up at 205 is my point. There's
Yeah, but
nobody
I'd,
like.
I'd bet you a significant amount of honor or pride that the men's 205 has somebody coming. I mean, it's just a more stable sport. There's more money in it. There's more history, more exposure, more opportunities, a bigger talent
But
pool
I'm saying
of people.
I think that the UFC will find a new woman bantamweight
They
just
could. It's
out of the
it's going to
woodwork,
be
and
it,
like it could be
it's entirely
Dufresne.
possible.
It could be Dufresne. She's well,
She's not going to have that it factor.
well. I mean, how do you? She's not even debuted yet. Like,
I know, but I mean I've
but yeah,
Dufresne's.
you follow the women's side of this sport. Like, you follow
I
the.
would see Eugene trains with her, and I've seen him interview her, and I've
You've
talked to
seen
her
him interview her?
myself.
I don't even think I've seen him interview her.
Dude, she's been on the show with me on it.
She
So
has?
yes, that was just not for very long, but she popped in while he was there in the gym. So I'm just not like
I'm just saying that,
no,
but
that
I
was
mean,
randomy. Never mind, that was
yeah,
randomy. I'm
I
channeling
was
my
gonna say,
mic.
you really
Yes.
are confusing me here. Like,
Yes, because I channel. For those who don't watch the show, I channel Fred Willard of Best in Show, one of my MMA commentary sometimes. Sometimes I'm one of the best analysts in the game, especially on the business side, the narrative side. Frequently with the fight nonsense and the trivia. I am fucking
so
Fred
yes,
Willard phoning
I
it in. So
I could see Dufresne being somebody who could break out, and
now
make.
I gotta Google this chick.
Uh,
See, because I was thinking of Jermaine Durandamy, and so
yeah,
let me look at her.
in
Uh,
sort of a cyborgish way, in that she's basically been bulldozing people early in her career.
yeah, but
Just
see, Cyborg doesn't sell. That's
well,
the
we don't
thing.
know if Cyborg sells.
We know Cyborg doesn't sell. She was the face of women's MMA for a terrible multi-year span after she knocked out Carano and
She
before Ronda
a-
Rousey came along.
After she knocked out Carano, she was basically injured and suspended. So
Well, she
it
still
doesn't
had
tell.
moments, and the fights didn't draw at all,
She
and
had
nobody cared.
very, very few moments, Nate.
Now,
Very
Alex
few.
Dufresne, I hate to say it, but this is a sexist, appearance-based world. This
So
is
yeah,
not.
stop right there. Just don't say it.
Yeah, no,
Just
she's
don't
not going to be
say
a
it.
star. I'm just saying she's not going to be a star. That's all I'm saying.
Just don't say it. All my point is that if she wins, if she can come out
Well,
and
wait a minute.
knock
Hmm,
girls out,
that's
then
that's not the appeal of women's MMA,
but
though.
but there are so few women who actually do that. I mean, like I
It's true. That's why there've only been two that mattered in terms of business matters. And I can tell you right now, Alexis Dufresne is not. She could disembowel people in the cage. She's not selling tickets. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen.
I
But
don't
we'll
know.
see. We'll see.
I have serious doubts about your acumen on this.
I'll just keep watching
Foresight.
over time. My predictions on the business side tend to be more accurate than yours. Just watch me. Um,
I right now I'm being forced to, so I'm not missing.
and so are 63 viewers who are not being forced but are drunken
But
whatever
my
else
point
after the
is
show and want
that
to hear
I
us
think
talking about
that
this.
much like I guess, and in this way it'd be more like heavyweight. Somebody's just gonna come out of nowhere. I
Eventually, but
mean,
I think there could be another 2 year gap, 3 year gap. There's not. It's not like men's athletics where there's a big pool of wrestlers, a big pool of boxers, kickboxers, jiu-jitsu champions, sambo champions. I mean, every women have analogs for most of those, but those are very thin. Like women's boxing is a shadow of what it was 10 years ago. It,
but the upside of this is too though that MMA is one of the few places that they can actually make any money.
It's true. It's
Like
very true, and it's
you know,
also not. It's still in the like what you'd call the Brock Lesnar era, with somebody
yeah,
with one like what you saw from Ronda Rousey tonight was a judo exhibition with some punching added,
yeah,
but the toss and the scarf control with the side headlock, with the legs, anchoring that woman's head and shoulders to the floor, that was judo. This is
yeah.
Olympic judo because she added some savage punching, and coming to the fight, like I was watching it with a friend and his wife and my wife. And women are always more interested in women fighting. What are you going to say? And they were both struck by like, wow, this chick is really intense and really angry. Like they could tell going in that Rousey was like scary. And then when they saw that, they were both like, damn. And they were worried about the other girl when she was clearly like hurt. Not doesn't seem like she was horrifically hurt, but there was moments where she was stunned, didn't know where she was.
Yeah.
Then you see the doctor and the ref telling her, no, the fight's over and you lost. And then you see the emotional heartbreak on her face, which to somebody who doesn't watch fights regularly, that was all shocking new stuff. And that's what Ronda Rousey is about. She's bringing in new people, new interest. But if you're right with this theory that she's just sort of, people are just stopping by to see the Ronda Rousey show once and not coming back for more, that's a very interesting theory. Like that puts a definite ceiling on how big she can get, especially if they don't get opponents for her. So
Yeah, I
anyway,
mean, I do have a feeling that 135. I mean, I feel basically long term 135 is gonna be one of those divisions where they will create the big stars there, but
it's
they're
hard to
never going
create.
to
I mean,
be able.
this sport might not even be around. I mean, like this is a
Well,
very new
okay, but
sport.
but that's neither here nor there. Um,
It is here. This is what
okay,
we
well, my
do.
point is that Jesus,
The
like
new caliphate was announced by ISIS today. Zane, what are your thoughts? Anyway, never mind.
yeah, but my point is that it's a division that they're always going to be able to push it more easily than the other women's divisions that they ultimately have,
Sure, sure.
but
Which is
they
115, the strawweight
are
division.
going to have a lot more trouble drawing talent to it. I mean, 115 is exponentially better than 135. It's basically like the auxiliary of welterweight and light heavyweight when you look at the talent
Yeah,
depth.
yeah. So that 115 is much closer to the average weight of an athletic woman in her early 20s than
And
135 is.
that division is stacked with talent, and there's no lack of talent coming up.
And quite a bit of charismatic ladies that could potentially move the needle, perhaps. Because I think
Yeah,
women's fighting is one of those things that is culturally more relevant than men's fighting right now. I think we're in a situation where women are entering combat in the armed forces, and it's becoming kind of a normal thing. Women are starring in action movies. We're comfortable as a society suddenly with seeing women punch each other in the face, which is something that's way, way a big change. Like 20 years ago, 40 years ago, that wasn't okay. That would have been horrifying. My grandfather and grandmother would have been absolutely horrified to watch women's prize fighting. That would have been banned in a heartbeat in 1920, 1950, 1960. '70s it would have been quite a freak show. I mean, women's tennis was controversial in the
Yeah.
1970s. Like, so, a woman ran in the Boston Marathon the first time. Men got out on the course and tried to grab her and stop her from competing. Okay, so this is a very novel thing in our culture, and so I think women's fighting has this potential to catch bottled lightning and have some social significance and catch people's attention in the way that men's fighting always has that potential. Prize fighting's always been in and out one of the biggest sports, whether it was pro wrestling in the 1900s, whether it was pro boxing throughout the 20th century for the most part. I mean, Muhammad Ali was one of the five most famous people on earth in the 1960s, right up there with the Beatles. And so, and Mike Tyson. Tyson quite possibly had several years in the late 80s, early 90s where he was the most first famous person on earth worldwide. And so fight sports has this potential to draw the eye, but I think women's sports, unless it's something freakishly exceptional for the UFC to do that, I mean, UFC has to compete with boxing for that. Boxing can barely do that anymore. Women's MMA, though, I think doesn't have a chance to be Muhammad. I don't see a future Muhammad Ali coming out of women's MMA, or a future Seabiscuit for that matter. I mean, I just don't see something that everybody's going to
Future
care about for a
Seabiscuit.
decade. Well, like if you talk, my mom's elderly.
Yeah, no,
Seabiscuit was,
I know what you
yeah,
mean, but
yeah. And they're making movies about Seabiscuit to this day. I'm not comparing women to horses or men to horses. I'm
I
just saying,
know.
as a sporting figure in the popular psyche, Seabiscuit was a big fucking deal. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
a whole generation of people cared about horse racing for the rest of their lives because of that fucking horse. They wrote
yeah,
books
no, I
about that
know.
horse. I
They made
mean,
a movie how many decades later?
yeah, my
That
kid knows who Seabiscuit was. Okay, he's
yeah,
6. He doesn't know, who he knows who Abraham Lincoln was and George Washington, and that's it for presidents. And he knows who Seabiscuit is. So Seabiscuit's a big deal. Anyway, women's MMA does have that potential, even if they lose Ronda Rousey, even if they don't have a star champion at 135, 115 has a lot of potential. But like, where's the UFC go from here? If Ronda Rousey's off for a few months, we've got a potential rivalry with Weidman and Machida, but not one that's going to just electrify people. But fight fans are going to be riveted to see that fight again. Am I wrong? I mean, would you pay
oh
tomorrow to book see an
yeah,
immediate
yeah,
rematch?
absolutely. I mean, that's one of the very best. I mean, Weidman Machida is this sport distilled to a single fight. That is
Yes.
what this sport is about. That is what on the best day you want to see in the cage. You want to see
Yes.
that. It's two
Yes.
incredibly technical athletes going through all the different areas of the sport. And
With different approaches to each aspect of the sport.
yep,
That's what I was really juiced on. I don't know if we've ever seen that before, because when it comes to kickboxing, Weidman is basically a Muay Thai boxing guy. He's not a karate. Machida has a very weird outlier style for striking. When it comes to takedowns, Machida, the sumo stuff might have something to it. I mean, he does seem to have some tricks that you don't see coming out of people from wrestling backgrounds, and they
yeah.
work.
No, he
And
knows how to get his hips out. I mean, that's the big thing is he knows exactly how to just jut his hips back out of a takedown while controlling. And I mean, there's this whole thing about
he
takedown
gets
and like
those underhooks on the shoulders like in so instinctively. It's a thing of beauty.
yeah, it's that, and it's just too like it's this. There's this whole like steering wheel thing where you get one arm, forearm on the shoulder, and one arm on the bicep, and you actually steer the takedown direction as it comes as the shot
Yep.
comes in. And he has all the little tricks of takedown defense for MMA that are actually functional and work. And
Yes.
Weidman still has the ability to just blast through him, just use pure athleticism and
And decades of training at a
yeah,
fine
decades of
martial
training.
art,
But
at
I mean, just
wrestling.
like
Yeah.
just bulldoze through whatever takedown defense Machida might
Yeah.
have in
Yeah.
place.
And then on the ground, very different styles. I mean, they're both jiu-jitsu guys. Weidman trains under Matt Serra, who's definitely of the Gracie lineage, and Lyoto Machida, Brazilian uh, jiu-jitsu black belt himself. Both of them like to play top, though. Neither guy is known for his guard game, especially. And so I was very curious to see who was going to be on the bottom, and I think that's where Machida lost the fight ultimately. I mean, that's where the nails were put in the coffin. I think. I
Yeah, I mean
think.
that's where he really started to get beat up in the third round.
Yeah.
Was he when he got taken down and Weidman started landing some heavy shots, and that's where Machida really first started to look like he was suddenly getting really busted up. But I
Yes,
mean, Weidman won that fight in all areas.
it's true.
Machida,
He outstruck him.
yeah, Machida was able to compete and compete late and almost take the fight at times, but Weidman, I mean, statistically, if you took the whole fight as a whole, Weidman won it in every area it went.
Yes, yes, this is
So
true.
like,
But if you're watching certain things like who controls the cage, Weidman came out as the predator in the cage and was cutting it off and controlling it. But once Machida stuffed the first takedown, then suddenly Machida had a little bit more room to move. And so for much of the fight, they were still fighting about who's going to
yep,
control the movement in the cage, which made it a completely different fight, a very competitive fight, and just a great fight.
yeah.
Weidman might win this fight 10 out of 10 times, but I think that they could all very well be very competitive and fun fights. So that's exciting. But like, who else is on the middleweight horizon for Weidman now? What happens next?
They're probably gonna try and throw Belfort at him. I think that'll happen.
Yeah, I think that'll happen too.
I
If
think the
if
fact
you
that
think it
we saw
happens in
them,
Las Vegas though,
I don't. It doesn't even matter at this
but do
point.
they? It could matter. That Las
It
Vegas is
could
the one
matter
that's
if
drug testing
Belfort is
everybody.
that stupid, and he could be that stupid.
Yeah,
Um, but I mean, the fact that they got out there and asked Ronda Rousey to fill in next month tells you that they are going to make Belfort a title challenger.
oh yeah,
Like
yeah,
that tells you that there's no they can't pass on any of their draws. You know,
yeah.
like Chael
Except
Sonnen
the Diaz brothers.
literally
They can let them sit on the shelf because they want to get paid.
for who?
The Diaz brothers.
Oh well, yeah, that's true
They
because
don't have. I mean, the Diaz brothers don't have a competitive case to make that. Hey,
no,
I should be. But they do have a business case to make. In
yeah,
boxing, they would be doing pay-per-views and headlining cards, regardless. I mean, look who
yeah,
headlines cards in boxing. It's the guys who've lost the big fights to the big superstars. It doesn't have anything to do with whether or not they're at the top of the division
yeah,
competitively. It has to do with, do people know who they are and do they care?
yeah.
And so, anyway, but go ahead. That's a good point, though, that they desperately need the Belfort fight.
They definitely need what they definitely desperately need, and I think this is where the Diaz brothers get in. Is what they desperately need is company men or women who can draw. That's what they want.
Yeah, and
And
that's a hard combination to get and run a sport.
yeah, and that's what they're desperate for, and that means that Belfort will be up there because
Yes.
Belfort is a company man. I mean, he
Despite their
made
long track record of failing drug tests, that apparently is not a disqualifier from being a good company employee. Isn't that a
yeah,
great world?
well, I
Like,
mean, like he may be totally untrustable in terms of building anything around him, but he always wants to show up and wants to fight and wants to be in the UFC. I mean,
yeah, that's
he
true.
makes that there's no part of you never hear Belfort talk about how the UFC is screwing him over.
Well,
Like
you know,
that's
Belfort is one of the few guys of his generation of Brazilian fighters who had more success in the UFC than in Pride. Like, he fought in Pride plenty.
yeah,
He failed his first drug test for Pride in Las Vegas, but his big success was his UFC wins. In Pride, he was seen as something of a bust. I mean, he lost to
yeah. I mean,
Sakuraba early on. He lost to Dan
basically
Henderson.
Belfort is the anti Vanderlei.
Yeah, and which is he destroyed Vanderlei in the UFC way back in the '90s, and then
Yeah,
never got to fight him in Pride. Was in opposite brackets in various tournaments, and would then lose, fuck up and
yeah.
lose to, I believe, Alistair Overeem in an early round. Um, anyway, yeah, I mean, the other person on the horizon is Jacare Souza, who's supposed to
Yeah,
fight in the co-main event of UFC 176, and now that entire card is in doubt. And even if it wasn't, nobody was going to see it anyway. So Jacare is basically screaming into the void. He's this great athlete, combines Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with athleticism and an aggressive striking style that's continually improving.
and
And
the worst part of that is that it's even that he's going to be in a fight that he's already been in. I mean, I
yes,
realized that either he or Rockhold will be the clear next guy to be able to be in line for a title shot after Vitor.
yeah,
Um, but it is a bit of a like you are putting all your eggs in the Vitor basket for the immediate future, and then hoping that this fight that we've already seen before doesn't
which is
knock
Jacare
both
against
men out.
Gegard Mousasi.
Yeah.
And they fought. And was it in Japan a long time ago? And did Musashi beat him with the up kick? Is that the
Yep.
famous fight that
Yeah.
made Musashi?
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a
Not
reason to
Musashi.
have that fight. That's I think a legit fight.
Yeah, I mean it is
Musashi
a
just gave
legit fun fight, but it
yeah.
is also just sort of
If
like I
Musashi
mean
wins, you don't have very much because we just saw him lose to Lyoto Machida, and I mean, his other UFC fight was against Ilir
yeah,
Latifi.
if Musashi won, you probably have to do Musashi Rockhold.
Yeah, yeah, and that could and then that could end up with a Rockhold fight. But anyway, I think we've wrung every drop out of this orange, and I think I'm still gonna have to rock a jet lag baby to sleep after this. So life is
All
grand. Life is grand, St. Simon. Anyway, thanks for watching this. If you like this sort of thing, give us a like on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at the Zane Simon or at Kid Nate. Read us on bloodyelbow.com, and subscribe to MMANation.com on YouTube because then you'll see all of these wonderful videos as we create them. I'll be back tomorrow with a bathrobe review of this. I'm probably going to watch the fight again and then do a bathrobe review. And then Eugene Robinson will have Knuckle Up with his take on it on Monday. And then we don't have an event coming up right on the horizon, so we'll figure out. We're going to do some goofy bullshit with Dallas Winston and Connor Rubish and the whole gang.
and of
Thanks,
course we
St.
have a card
Simon.
tomorrow.
Excuse me, what? Oh, yes. Oh, my God. See, this is the Fred Willard of announcing that I'm cultivating. This is a style. I'm not just an incoherent idiot. Tomorrow night, the UFC has the Ultimate Fighter finale. And so, Zane, are you back for this shit tomorrow night?
I might be. We'll see.
See, this is what I have to deal with. I might have to actually watch the fights and do this alone tomorrow night. So
We
we'll be
we
back.
will figure we will figure this out. I have to
Yes.
figure out exactly how much I'm willing to sacrifice for this card tomorrow.
Yes, because it's BJ Penn against Frankie Edgar, a fight that frankly should have been on this pay-per-view. BJ Penn, one of the all-time most storied legends of MMA. Maybe not an all-time great. Has a case to be an all-time great or a Hall of Famer, but definitely one of the most storied, the only lightweight fighter that's ever been a star in the United States. Fighting Frankie Edgar, a guy who beat him twice for the lightweight title. They're fighting at featherweight. They just coached one of the worst seasons, what Dana White said was the worst season of the Ultimate Fighter. So they are basically the only fight on that card of any interest. Is that we just did a preview, and I can remember literally that fight and nothing else. I vaguely remember some about the Ultimate Fighters that Fraser Caffine told us. But is there anything else on that card?
Oh God, let me have to look at
You
it.
don't even look it up. There's not because we just talked about it for an hour the other night and now don't
Oh,
remember. So we'll
Justin
see you tomorrow
Goggins
night.
is fighting. So watch
Ah,
Justin
yes,
Goggins.
and Dustin Ortiz, some flyweight
Yep.
prospects that are exciting. But again, flyweights just had a headline pay-per-view, nobody cared. So flyweight prospects is not going to get people salivated. Anyway, I'll be back tomorrow night, chained to the desk. Like nobody, not that anybody feels sorry for me. Oh, poor me, I have a job and I have to talk about cage fighting. But that's what I'm saying. Poor me, I have to talk about cage fighting tomorrow. So anyway, so thanks, Simon. Well, I can't believe this is happening. Anyway, but that's what makes life great. So we'll see. We'll see you tomorrow night. Those of us who are chained to the UFC slave galleys will be rowing away as BJ Penn and Frankie Edgar wrap up the UFC Expo and fight in a storied fight, a fight that matters for MMA history, and on a fight card that does not matter for MMA history unless some future star emerges there, which seems unlikely. Anyway, adios, MMA aficionados. This is Knate. We'll see you next time.